Hi, I'm Adam Pritchard, Assistant Curator for Paleontology for the Virginia Museum of Natural History, bringing you more tales of ancient life from the Harvest Foundation Hall of Ancient Life. When people first walk into the museum, the first thing they see in the hall is, it's actually probably Allosaurus. Everyone loves dinosaurs. But the other first thing they see is this huge dome-shaped rock structure sitting alongside Allosaurus, over 6 feet across. This mass is over 2 tons, and it's supported by a special brace to make sure it doesn't, cave in the floor. What the heck is it doing here? Well, when people first walk into the museum, I like to listen in and see how people interpret the exhibits, and I often hear people from kids to adults say, "Wow, look at the huge turtle shell," and that bugged me. This is not a turtle shell. But my wife correctly pointed out that to the eyes of someone who doesn't look at fossils all the time, it really does look a lot like a turtle shell. But it's not the turtle. It's not the turtle. This massive dome isn't made of bone. It was built not by a single organism, but by millions upon millions of tiny microbes related to modern-day bacteria and algae over 500 million years ago, predating the dinosaurs by almost 250 million years. And even 500 million years ago, it represented a very ancient way of making a living. This is the tale of the Microbialite. Now, the oldest organisms that we're aware of on Earth were single-celled ones, some related to modern-day bacteria, others to modern-day algae. For about the first 3 billion years of the fossil record, there is no evidence for organisms with more than one cell. But sometimes single-celled organisms gathered together in huge, vast colonies and mats. As they grew and metabolized, they left behind sheets of rock, basically, calcium carbonate, and these could form distinctive big structures, giant domes, called stromatolites. For billions of years, this was kind of the way to go. There were no animals around that could really eat these massive colonies of microbes.
Just think about a world like that. You walk along this warm, shallow waters on a beach. You hear the surf as the tide is coming in and out. But there's no plants on the land. There's no animals in the water, no birds or insects making noise in the air. There is no sound but the waves coming in and out. And the water, for miles and miles on end, you can see these sorts of domed structures just sitting out there in the surf. And that is the sum total of living things visible to your eyes. Nothing else. It's this alien landscape that really dominated on the Earth for billions of years before organisms with more than one cell in their bodies became a thing. And then you might suffocate, because before these single-celled organisms that built these microbialites started doing photosynthesis, there wasn't a whole lot of oxygen in our atmospheres either. Stromatolites and other microbialites literally helped prepare Earth for animal, plant life, all the other kingdoms, with oxygen.
However, that started to change about 800 million years ago when animals first really started showing up in the fossil record. And it really got going during the Cambrian period, about 540 million years ago, when we see the first animals with exoskeletons and shells showing up in the fossil record. Things like trilobites, anomalocarids, worms, and even the ancestors of the vertebrates. At that point, the dome-shaped structures built by these microbe colonies, the stromatolites, started to get kind of internally more complicated, and those started to develop into what are called thrombolites. Our structure here is a mixed stromatolite and thrombolite. It has the thin sheets of a stromatolite and the complex internal structure of a thrombolite. Our thrombolites come from the end of the Cambrian period, about 500 million years ago. There are some ridges and grooves on our microbialite here that suggests that it was fed upon by some kind of animal in the ancient past. It was initially collected by paleontology curator Butch Dooley from the Boxley Quarry in Bedford County, Virginia. It was first actually noticed by Boxley employee Richard Benge. The specimen came from a shallow, likely kind of tidal environment along the seashore. This giant dome is actually one of 3 specimens of microbialites collected from the Boxley Quarry. There are 2 smaller ones as well. The giant is 1.9 meters across at the widest. It's huge. Now, around 500 million years ago, when our microbialites come from, we start to see a sort of drop in the diversity of these things in the fossil record. And that seems to happen around the same time that animals become more able to move around, they have greater needs for energy, and huge, unmoving colonies of tiny microbes and algae are perhaps too easy of a sort of buffet for things to graze on. We also see around that time the evolution of modern day reef organisms, the ancestors of corals, for example. Now, today, there are still stromatolites and thrombolites surviving on the planet. They live in really extreme shoreline environments, usually ones with very high salt concentration. That sort of thing prevents animals from living in that environment and thus eating the organisms that make up the stromatolites and thrombolites. And yeah, 3.5 billion years later, they're still going. Now, microbialites are not my area of research, so I had to do quite a bit of research to try and understand the significance of our big old dome here. I'd welcome critiques from any experts on the subject. With that, I'm Adam Pritchard, and I'll be back with more tales of ancient life. If you gotta clean this thing, you gotta get some polish from Dome Depot. Simpsons movie reference.